Okay. So, why don't you tell me about what day did you enlist in the Army?
I enlisted in October the 23rd, 1967. I went into the service in Beckley, West Virginia, and was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. Did my individual training in Missouri at Fort Leonard Wood, and after the completion of training was assigned to Germany for my first assignment, which was unusual because most of my class was assigned to Vietnam.
Okay. So, what did you do at first? Like, what was your job?
Well, I was a combat engineer, and I worked on an M113 track was our vehicle, and we were an armored engineer unit, part of the 4th Armored Division at that time, stationed in Bamberg, Germany. The opportunities to go to school were pretty good there, and so I was sent to 3 different schools while I was there. The explosives and demolition training course, landmine warfare, and then a non-commissioned officers academy during the time I was in Germany. But being a young person at that time and being in the service and thinking that if there was a war going on, that was the place to be, I volunteered for Vietnam shortly after I got to Germany, but it took some time for that process to be acted on. So I didn't ship out to Germany until the following August.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, ship out to Vietnam from Germany until the following August.
So, where did you get deployed to in Vietnam?
I initially, like everyone else, you go into the replacement depot at Long Binh, and then you're assigned out to whatever unit you're going to be in. I was assigned to the 5th Infantry, 5th Mechanized Infantry, which was the furthest north of all the American units in Vietnam. It was stationed right on the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam. So when we all ran over to the bulletin board after getting our assignments, we all started looking around Saigon and places like that. So it took a little while to gradually work my finger up until I found where the Quang Tri was the city that was closest by, that was where we were assigned. And then when you arrived there, you were in a little reception thing for a couple weeks, or not a couple weeks, probably a few days. And then you went on to your unit. And my unit was A Company of the 7th Engineer Battalion, which was the only engineer company assigned to the 1st Brigade of the 5th Infantry. So that's how I got there.
Wow. Okay. So, what first action did you see? I mean,
Well, my first action was a bit unusual because being an explosive and assigned to the demolitions position in my squad, my first job was to go into the field and blow up an American tank that had been disabled and they couldn't recover it.
oh wow.
So instead of destroying enemy equipment, the first thing I destroyed was an M48 tank that was damaged too bad to recover. And then from that point on, I went out on, typically the demolition teams went out 2 people assigned to each infantry company. And the majority of my deployments were like that, although I did do some squad missions when we were mechanized. If we went out individually, we could go out either walking with the straight leg infantry, which was the 1st of the 11th battalion. We could go out with the mechanized infantry, which was the 1st of the 61st battalion, or we could go out with the tank battalion, which was the first of the 77th. So there were 3 maneuver battalions that our company supported.
Well, that's, wow, that's quite a bit. So, let's see, any major like historical battles that you were in or near? Or?
Well, we went, it was Quezon, the big battle of Quezon was in 1968, and of course I arrived after that. But we did do some missions that were out in the same general area where they would take large artillery weapons out and fire onto the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we would go along for minesweep support. And that was done on several different occasions. And then our northernmost fire support base was a place called Alpha 4. And there were some battles around the area called Can Tien. Again, the heavy fighting took place there with the Marines prior to me arriving. But we still had regular skirmishes, and we were shelled quite a bit there. But our primary function, if we weren't out with the infantry, was to conduct a minesweep on the section of road, either between A4 and the next base, which was Charlie 2, or from Charlie 2 down to the main road, which was at a little village called Cam Lo. So it was a lot of minesweeping, a minor amount of demolition work there, and that was typical for the first few months, and then again later on. But then we had a large platoon-sized mission in the Bai Long Valley, which was south of Quang Tri. Our mission there was to go out and improve a road so that the tanks could go into an area that they'd never been before and try to suppress an NVA buildup in that area. One of the difficulties when they did the reconnaissance was the road had been originally built by the French, and it was quite narrow, and it went along a river where there wasn't wide enough for the tanks. And my main job was to use explosives to knock a cliff face back about 4 feet so the bulldozers could then clear the rubble and make way for the tanks. And that was very successful, and but that took a little longer than most missions. I think we were gone several weeks. Then went back to doing a stand-down mission, which is where we usually would do construction work on the fire support bases, and we did that for maybe a month or so. Pardon me. And then they would start sending us out in individual demolition teams after that, simply because our turn to rotate came up pretty often. The next significant battle that was, I might have the number wrong, but the mission was called Lan Sam. I think it was 719, but it was when the South Vietnamese did an incursion into Laos to try to block the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The American forces didn't go into Laos, but we accompanied the South Vietnamese right up until the point where they did. And there was considerable fighting on that, and lost quite a few members of our platoon during that time. That was near the end of my time there. I served from the 2nd of September 1971 until the end of May, pardon me, get my dates mixed up. The 2nd of September 1969 until the end of May 1971. So a bit over 20 odd months consecutively. It just kept extending. But I think as far as named battles, that was probably the majority of them that we really participated in. But there were a lot of, our bread and butter was day-to-day Many days boring and routine, and then interspersed by very active, um, terrifying days sprinkled into the bunch.
So about your minesweeping, what exactly did you do?
Well, typically the minesweep team was about 4 or 5 soldiers, and you would have a metallic mine detector, and you would walk in advance of the vehicles. Uh, you would have a couple people that would be assigned as your security, and they would walk off the road, usually a little ways, and behind you to help protect you while you were doing that. You couldn't really carry a rifle and do the minesweep at the same time. So oftentimes you would maybe just have a pistol, and that was more for peace of mind than anything else. And then you would conduct the minesweep. But the area where we operated was so littered with metallic debris that it was unusual to find mines with a magnetic detector. More often you found them by clues, disturbed earth, unusual telltale things in the surrounding trail. And then during that time there was a lot of use of plastic mines. Very effective East German mines that they had obtained that were quite effective. But we were successful, found many mines, probably as many though by visual clues as by the mine detector. One experience I had minesweeping, we'd gone up on an area west of Alpha 4 they called Rocket Ridge. It was given that name because the NVA and the VC could get up on that ridge and then fire rockets into our compound. So a lot of times they would do excursions out there and occupy the ridge for a brief time to discourage that. I had a small team attached to an armored tank company, and if I recall right, there were 3 or 4 of us. And we conducted a minesweep, but by having a small team and the tanks wanting to go fast, and you can only walk, and be effective at a certain pace. Occasionally, the commander would direct me to stop, and we'd get up, and they would drive without the minesweep for short distances in order to make up a little bit of time. We got to our area. We found some mines up on the ridge and destroyed them. And it was time to leave. We were going to drive back without sweeping because we had covered the road on the way up. We had a narrow lane that we cleared for the tanks to maneuver. The normal procedure then is to put your minesweep guys up on the tanks, but on the outside near the front so they can see and help the driver look for anything that would be a hazard, a danger, or a booby trap, or for mines as well. So I had positioned our people in various vehicles. I was on the front tank and riding on the left front fender on top of a toolbox that was called a sponson box. It was a built-in toolbox above the tread on the tank, and pretty reasonable place to see in order to assist the driver and the tank commander on where to maneuver. Well, the only difficulty was that the driver, in trying to get positioned, drove outside of the lane we had cleared and detonated a mine. Unfortunately for me, it was underneath the left front fender where I was sitting. But by being on top of the sponson box and sitting on some other equipment, I didn't receive any shrapnel, but was hurtled quite a distance into the air and pretty battered when I came down on top of the tank. Was medevac from there, and that was the end of that operation for me. Spent a little while in the Navy hospital at Quang Tri, but after a short time returned to my unit.
So, did you get any honors for that, or?
Well, for several different times for different missions, I was received a Purple Heart for that action, and also for that whole process when we supported the Vietnamese, I received an individual Vietnamese award. It was their Cross of Gallantry with a Bronze Star attachment. Various different assignments I received awards for. Probably the most significant was I received the Soldier's Medal, which is for heroism, and that was on a mission where some of our own soldiers had wandered into one of our minefields mistakenly at night, and I was helicoptered into the minefield along with another soldier to rescue the survivors. The weather was quite bad, so the helicopter wasn't able to return for us, and we stayed in the minefield overnight until we could see the next day to probe our way through the minefield at the end of probably 15 hours or so out in the minefield. It was interesting, the things that come to mind, because you tell every story you've ever heard and make up any lies you can think of to keep each other awake. And obviously we were successful because we both emerged without injury. Gentleman's name that I was out there with had been in our company but had transferred to a Ranger unit. His name was Bill Neal, and I understand that later on he was killed. But that particular night we were successful in saving one of the people that survived. All the rest were killed.
So, you had, I'm sure, lots of buddies in there, and
Oh, many good friends. Some of them good friends to this very day. Probably some of my closest friends included my squad leader, who for the majority of the time was a fine gentleman from Massachusetts named Jeff Muther. Many of my squad mates and platoon mates, John FIFO, David Allen, Mark Smith, Jim Cunningham, and the list is quite extensive. It's probably not fair to try to recollect all the names, but a fine bunch of people, and to this day a few of us keep in touch with each other.
so were any of your closer friends injured or killed in Vietnam?
Yeah, one of the guys that actually we lived together in a small bunker at C2 was killed on a minesweep out in the area west of A4. He was the only member of my exact squad to die, and his I lost his name in my mind. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But been to the Vietnam Wall a couple times to look him up, and he's listed predominantly there.
So, where are you listed there?
You'll have to die first.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it was for
I wasn't
people
sure.
that were killed in action in Vietnam. If you're ever on the mall there in Washington, D.C., you should take a stroll by there. It's a pretty impressive monument.
So, what was your most memorable experience there in Vietnam?
I'm not sure there was a most memorable one or not, but there were several of some amusing ones. On one mission, we were part of a reaction force, and they used us. They had a few engineers, a few medics, and some security people. And if the situation was such that they thought that would solve a problem, they would fly us by helicopter to the area. Pardon me. Oftentimes it was to assist pilots that had been shot down. On one mission, we were flown into the demilitarized zone to help evacuate some pilots from an air crash. And we came under some pretty heavy mortar fire just about the time we disembarked from the helicopters. Well, that area is really just covered with old bomb craters and shell holes and things, so it was easy to find cover, except the crater that I jumped into was filled with a good bit of water. And as I jumped in, I had landed on a quite large python, startling him as much as it startled me. He evacuated to the west side, and I evacuated to the east side, probably with greater speed than him. And my squad mates and the other people out there teased me about it for quite some long time. So that's probably as memorable as any story.
So, what were the rations like over there?
Well, it was very similar to the rations of our forefathers in the Korean War and Vietnam. It was predominantly sea rations, which are canned meals. Today, things like beanie weenies would be a typical type of thing, and everybody had their favorites. Some of the desserts that were desirable was the pound cake versus the